this source is, this divine, miraculous source of everything, of all love, of all creation, of all power. Everything we think, everything we feel comes from this source. And because there is one source, we are one with that source. Every thought we have, everything we feel, every moment in this service, every new idea we have, every word that we share comes from that source, our heart and our being. And we are one with that source. We are so thankful for each and every person in this room today, the people watching on Facebook Live and in the archives. We are thankful that you have joined us, that the message that you hear, receive, and feel in your heart will be deeply felt. We are thankful to Chris for the technology and the hospitality that we will share afterwards, and for everything that makes Sundays so magical. And with a deep breath, we ground this by saying, so it is.
So today's reading I got from a book by a spiritual teacher. He's a Unity minister. Many of you know him. I was introduced to him through his work through Reverend Valerie, who knows him well. His name is Michael Renad. He's the spiritual leader at the Unity Center in Sedona. Because the topic today is on sacred sexuality, I took some reading from his book called Sacred Sexuality. And this is absolutely beautiful. It is all connected to the source. So we have about a page and a half to read, but this is just divinely inspired. So sit back and enjoy. If sex, in and of itself, were magical, there would be a lot of enlightened porn stars in the world. On the contrary, without a spiritual and loving intent, sex limits the expression of our true self and becomes a form of self-condemnation. In other words, sex without depth of consciousness is not only valueless but destructive as well. Conscious sex, on the other hand, is one of the finest rewards on the path to enlightenment. When practicing sacred, conscious sex, you are encouraged to access the core of love within your being, discover deeper aspects of yourself, and then share with another if you so choose. When sharing sacred sexuality with a partner, you develop a deeper love and respect for each other, while creating and experiencing greater qualities of ecstatic energy throughout the nervous system. The exploration of sacred sexuality is not a means for self-gratification or the fulfillment of ego-centered goals and pleasures. Instead, it's a method for playfully discovering ways to learn about yourself and others while connecting with spirit. Paradoxically, this spiritual connection is accomplished by living the divine through your physical life, rather than by escaping that same physical life. When truly walking the spiritual path, you perceive all things as sacred, including sexuality. Perceiving all things as sacred, you no longer evaluate the world and other beings with your senses and then formulate opinions. Instead, you understand and know that all experiences perceived by the physical senses originate in the soul of the perceiver, which frees you to experience through your senses rather than judging with them. So every dance you dance or experience you have is not really with another person. It simply reflects a meeting with yourself. If we perceive ourselves as separate from the wholeness of spirit, we will undoubtedly search for our completion in others. This longing to find wholeness through others is an unhealthy manifestation of desire. Once we find the object of our search, for example, we desire to possess it or them. Now we are approaching the world as predators, seeking to capture anyone or anything that might, quote-unquote, complete us. When one hostage proves unfulfilling, we seek out and capture another person or object. This endless cycle of codependent behavior is the most rampant form form of addiction on earth. Eventually, failing to find fulfillment in others, we begin to realize that what we desire is not an object or person outside of ourselves. What we really desire and long for is a union with God. This realization redefines our old, limiting, negative concepts about desire. It awakens a truer, clearer understanding of the desire to remember the dismembered parts of our being. When our love is directed to all beings, all life, and all space, the flow of our awareness remains expansive. We no longer have a desire to own or control. Instead, we are free to love and be loved, to share love because we are loved. In this expansive state of being, lack and aloneness are non-existent. Here we can make a centered decision to share with one or more people. The ideal is to feel love for all and then choose how and with whom to demonstrate this love. To live and love in this state of consciousness is to live and love as God. Desire is now experienced as a unifying force and a vibration felt in and through all things, ultimately experienced as the emotion of God. Now you are free to observe and to relate to a person with an unconditional, unattached love and acceptance, with no desire for ownership or possession. In such a relationship, there are no agendas, and there can be deep sharing. The choice to see clearly through the eyes of unconditional love is the choice to see divinely. Such vision enables the gift of someone's true identity to emerge. Again, accessing this gift involves being with but not possessing another person. Love is shared between hearts and souls rather than egos. This new level of unconditional love and awareness helps you realize that you do not and cannot love or hate another because there is no other separate from you. Instead, your interactions with others either reflect self-love or self-betrayal. As your understanding of love and your true goodness develops, you find that since everyone you meet is a part of you, you are now safe to love everyone and everything. As you begin to realize that you are love, you no longer participate in the needy love with another. Rather, the love that you desire, the love you are desires to express and experience itself. In doing so, this love is expanded. As you awaken to your natural vibration of love, every particle of the universe of love is drawn to you. So, as you drink water or breathe air, these activities are no longer perceived as the means of meeting your needs. Instead, they are the irresistible joining of two parts of the same whole. The practice of sacred sexuality can be summarized as the process designed to deepen your connection to the spirit of love and to awaken your physical body, allowing this temple to become as passionate and alive as God originally intended it to be. And so it is.
Perfect for today. So I think we're putting on the cue now, because this is the beginning of the talk, isn't it? It's already on. Oh, it's been on. Okay, good then. I don't have to worry about that. So, if you could just show those first few slides, I'm going to show the slides for the talk for the week, and then I'm going to talk about a woman who I listened to this past week on numerous occasions because she has a bunch of different posts or videos on YouTube. And her name is Polly Eisendrath, and she's written many, many books. She is a Zen Buddhist. She is also a Jungian therapist, and she really talks so fully about why the necessity to be conscious, not just conscious to yourself, but conscious with another individual, somebody that can join in and being empathetic and sympathetic, and that is also part of what makes good sexuality. And so it's all about the spiritual path, just as you stated that last one. So just show the first few slides. So this month's lectures are all the colors of love. And then this one, Sacred Sexuality, is about today's particular talk. And then we have, okay, so there should be some other slides there. Are they not there? So I'm not going to worry about it if they're not. This is it. So I just want to read this verse because I think it's important to say, and it really just couples with what Vicki had to say. God has imparted our life to us, placing no limitation on condition that would restrict us other than this. Our life must be lived constructively, in unity and love and sympathy with everything around us, if we expect to live it to the fullest. I believe that every person is born to be creative and to live to the fullest and to be happy and glad and prosperous and whole. And there must be one more slide. Okay, so this pleasure gives you clarity. It refreshes and rejuvenates. It keeps you ahead of the curve. Pleasure sends you on wonderful journeys, and you will always arrive at your destination ahead of schedule. So that's part of the discussion too, is that pleasure is something that we seek, and pleasure is a human natural thing, and that it's got to be done in the ways that are respectful and honorable. Otherwise, unhappiness ensues. And she talks about this. She talked about the fact that up until 1960 to the 1960s, there was a whole different paradigm for marriage. People got married. The man was, it was like a corporation, she says. The man was the boss of the family. He doled out the money to the wife, to the children, and he took care of it in the way he chose. The wife basically stayed at home, obeying the husband's wishes, and really didn't think very much about working outside the home or looking to make her life fulfilled in any unique and equal way. She just went about the business of being the wife and mother. During the 60s, what happened was there was a revolution because it became the feminist movement, and lo and behold, the birth control pill was found, and women had more ways to protect themselves from sex and having children, so they began to want to be equals. As she says, this has created many, many struggles in lives, because women now wanting to be equal has made it much more difficult for men and women to naturally relate to each other unless they are both conscious beings. And when she says conscious beings, she's talking about what we do here. We become conscious of how we think, how we feel, and how we should relate in a beautiful way to other people, especially to the person that we might be with. So then she talked about, this is, I think, very, very interesting. They have now known that multiple partners absolutely does not work. People that seek sexuality out of the home, it usually ends up coming back into the home in some way that is very, very negative and causes tremendous anxiety. And a lot of anxiety for children because they don't quite know what's happening, but there's a lot of misery going on in families with multiple sexuality. In the 70s, there was a swinging era where people thought that they could try to be together and then just go about their business with other people, and that didn't work. She said that's a dead issue, couldn't work. And then she talked about the fact that from 3 to 6 times that you have intimacy with the person, there is a paired bonding that takes place. It's almost like a child being held and caressed by their mother when they're infants. If they have sex with somebody 3 to 6 times, and she states it can vary, it's almost inevitable that there will be an attachment bond that forms, and a possessiveness about the relationship at that point. And the separation anxiety that takes place with people after that period of time is quite severe. She said it's amazing that you think, oh, it's only 3 to 6 times, but people feel devastated when the relationship ends. They feel thrown out, or they feel whatever they may feel. And so this is another one of her messages. And she talks about true love. And she said it's practically non-existent. And that the reason it's non-existent is because it requires the consciousness of individuals to become whole unto themselves, standing as unique individuals, and like the branches tying you together. And she says that in a way that is like God. It's the familiar and the mysterious. When you have a relationship that is solid and separate, but connected and interdependent, that is when the relationship is like the familiar and mysterious. And it's very, very beautiful. And she longs for that. And in her practice as a psychotherapist, She is finding that in the past 25 years, the need to be equal has become the most important thing for everybody, men and women, and that it's almost impossible to find that because there's no such thing as perfect. We are all imperfect beings trying to be the best we can, and learning to accept ourselves is a big deal, let alone trying to accept somebody else. So when there's problems in a relationship, it's very hard to work through the conflicts because you don't have the patience to try and understand what's going on with the other person. In fact, she cites the fact that we all repeat our stories thousands of times. She said over and over again. She said, even as a therapist, I listen to people saying their stories over and over again, and I sometimes want to go, no, I have to hear this again. She said she feels it. But when you have tools to use, she said you don't scream at the spouse finally after the 1,000th time and say, why are you telling me the story again? I've already heard it. And she said when we become conscious and we are in communication with our spouses in ways that are sympathetic and empathetic, we then say to the spouse, you told me that story before. You know you've told me the story. So what is it about the story that you needed to tell me today? What is it that made you feel that I would learn something new? Or what were you trying to release or relate? So that you come from a whole different perspective when you come from that point of view. And she talks about the different things that are the dynamics of love, and the one that can lead to true love is the consciousness. But she talks about the first romantic love, and she says it's very intoxicating. She said it's also a psychotic delusion. She said because everybody that starts a relationship and falls in love or believes they've fallen in love, whether it's just attachment bonding, not necessarily love, is that they feel so compelled to see the person over and over again, be with the person in the beginning. Everything in the first 3 to 6 months is usually heaven. They haven't started to think about what might be wrong about the other person yet. But then the second thing that starts to happen is idealization. We begin to look at the person through our own eyes. We either see them as, oh, they're really great. They feel just like I do about such and such. Or, oh, they're really great. They're just my type of person. I know we're going to have a wonderful relationship. And she said that can last for many years, that you stay in that idealization place. But the truth is, after that comes the disillusionment, the point at which you begin to be fed up, the point at which you want changes to take place. And the only way that that ever gets healed is if you choose to heal it, that you choose to know your consciousness, and that each person involved in a true intimate relationship will go in that direction. So I've got so much to talk about with this, and I really want to just talk about a few paragraphs. I'm not going to even read any more from this at all. I want to say this. Oh, you have those questions, the talking points. If you can go back to the talking points. So, what is pleasure, and why do we think it is as a taboo? Now, we're obviously talking about intimate relationships. We're not talking about somebody that you see just casually. That's not what this is about. That would not be sacred sexuality. But even in your personal intimate relationship with somebody, one partner might think something is taboo while the other might not. So that's a thing to think about. Sexual energy is our life force. It's considered our way of creation. Obviously, we're born from sexuality. And then pleasure as a spiritual practice, and I'd like to read this statement. We can embrace our pleasure as an everyday practice of mindfulness, creation, happiness, fulfillment, and gratitude. Pleasure can be experienced every day through activities like enjoying a delicious meal. I think of that. I think eating is very sensuous. I mean, you think about it, the feeling in your mouth and swallowing it and how delicious it is and so forth. So I think I'd go along with that. Having a deep conversation, obviously, with a friend, taking a walk in nature, engaging in consensual and joyful sexual activity with a partner or ourselves, or anything else that makes us feel good. Pleasure is always experienced in the present moment, so by seeking out and engaging in pleasurable activities, we are practicing mindfulness and presence. Our bodies have nerve endings for a reason, so that we can feel good and enjoy being human. So I'd just like to open up this to conversation. looking at those questions, thinking about what I might have said, I know that for me, as I was reading and listening to her online, I thought to myself, oh my God, I really recognize what happened in my first marriage. Those steps were exactly what took place. I got to the point where I was beginning to, the disillusionment came in, and I began to get a little bit nasty. And she said, that's very typical. One or the other will start to be insulting or mean or whatever. And my ex actually wanted me to not pursue a singing career, and he gave me an option to either give it up or to stay with him, or he was leaving. And I, at that point, knew that if he stopped me, because that was so important in those years, I would have hated him. I just would have hated him. So it became very important to me to go into the separation. But I then fell into a terrible relationship because I was punishing myself for being that Barbara. How dare I ruin a marriage? Because that's what I felt I had done. So that goes along with the sex stuff too. Anyway, anybody have any comment?
Well, I agree with the steps, because at some point you change from the romantic being infatuated, exactly what she said, and then reality hits. And you have to make a choice at that point to see the person and love the person and see the different ways that you're loving each other, that it's not that passion, flowers every day. It turns into something else, but there's a huge bump there as it turns, and that even makes or breaks a relationship. I can understand that.
Can any of you who have been divorced or had separation think of how your relationship changed from the romantic, that psychotic delusion as she called it, to the point at which you really could no longer relate to each other? Anybody want to comment?
I have one comment that was spoken somewhere here. It talks about having relationships that are equal, which I feel is critically important. But someone pointed out some things. It's a very long conversation, but equal does not mean the same. And people, I did for years. I attributed having a co-equal relationship as being the same. And in that space, I wrecked every relationship I was ever in, because men and women are not the same, but we're equal. And so that's a little bit of a dichotomy, but it's...
No, but what you're saying, and actually I have a whole bunch on that specific topic. What she said is that that's what she's finding the big struggle with people in the last 25 years is they come in and talking, they're looking for that equal, for that person that is going to be just like them or complete them in some way. And she said it's impossible. We are all imperfect, so if we're looking for somebody to complete us, that person can never be perfect either. We all have our limitations. We really do.
I know I came in towards the end, but combination picking up, I don't think I've ever thought, I need somebody to complete me, or I'm nothing without a relationship, from the relationship experience that I have. I don't see it as something that defines me. And I think also, I don't know if you touched with J-Lo's thing on the Super Bowl that you had that.
Yeah, scantily.
Yeah, both of them were, but I mean, it's always women that get put out for having sexual energy and being out, in society. I thought it maybe more in the U.S., but I personally think sexual energy is part of our life force without swimming it down in combination really as a combination to going back further, whether it's goddess. Years ago I did a Sacred Love Goddess. I didn't do it, but I went to it, watch it, but it's part of us, and it's not light or dark, it's part of us. It's okay to be that, and it's also pleasure as spiritual practices. Sometimes there's a separation or an imposed separation, because that it's not spiritual. It is, but it depends how you see it. It's every bit of part, it's not all of us, whether it's on a physical, it's part of us, but it's not the greater part, but it still needs to be acknowledged and recognized without the BS after top of it and
Well,
stuff.
I don't know, you heard, it was on the news, I heard that Franklin Graham criticized and was offended, deeply, deeply offended, he who worships at Trump's feet. He actually said he thought it was absolutely obscene the way they were dressed, and he couldn't believe it.
A lot of people did.
And yes, a lot of people did. And yet, think about the times that we know that Trump actually physically molested people. So what is that? Is that a man can be offended by a woman being too overt, too sexual, but a man can do whatever he pleases? That goes back to the days before 1960 when men had a lot more freedom. And what I thought about as I was listening to Polly Eisendorf, I think why there are so many men in the Senate wanting to stop legal abortion and make some of the changes that take women back to the time before, is they want to go back to that time when they were the ones that were basically in
Controlling them.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the equal is not about being the same. Nobody can be the same. It's just that you are each valued individually. That's the equal. That there's the respect and autonomy. She talks about autonomy as being a very important part of being able to feel good about yourself. That you have your own thing that you do, that you love, that you do, and that then you come together maybe at the end of the day and you share the days. But she's also found that there are many relationships now that are separate by where people live. She had a person in the audience of this particular lecture that was in a relationship for 10 years with a man that was living in California, and they only saw each other every other week. And they had a thriving relationship. She said probably still in that romantic delusional stage.
That's okay. See what happened.
Yeah. So anybody have anything else that they'd like to say?
I'm exploring the piece, the pleasure as a spiritual practice, where loving yourself, and you hear that, you say, you have to love yourself in order for you to love anybody else. And it's easy to say, you say, oh, okay. But really deeply exploring that and saying, yes, it's true. If I love myself, truly love myself as a spiritual being, is going deep within and feeling that I am one, but as we practice, I'm one with God's Spirit, and deeply understanding that, I am in a much better place to open up that for someone else to really explore that. Because it kind of goes in with the pleasure and the taboo that, growing up, I was told, do not have sex. Do not, until you marry, do not have, or even, the self-gratification, pleasure. That was completely taboo. Don't go there. It was almost, I was taught, I was afraid of that, and now that loving is that loving yourself. There's so many areas to kind of explore with that. So, opening myself up to, well, okay, if I really have to love myself in order for me to be able to open my heart and allow someone to come into, through divorce, through a lot of relationships that haven't worked out, I've sort of built a little wall there. And over time, and that wall, and there have been people that have been trying to penetrate that a little bit, but it was really about me saying, okay, what is it? Am I, and like I say, there is a difference between sex and lovemaking. There is a huge difference. And I would be interested in, like, when you talked about the different partners and, that's interesting. Why does that not work? Is that,
Because there was somebody in the back.
I take great exception to what she says. I could introduce everybody in here to long-term poly relationships that are very successful these people are very loving and nurturing to each other. That is actually not accurate in my experience. And I can also show you people that are married for 60 years that have been swingers for 30 or 40 in fact.
Okay.
So I don't
Yeah,
agree with those
yeah,
things. Now, I do say some of those relationships fail, but some normal heterosexual married relationships fail, you know? So I don't think that's the problem. The problem in failed relationships is a spiritual problem.
Yes.
Has nothing to do with how many partners.
But here's the thing, is it possible to be completely loving and honest and respectful of the mate that you live with if you have that kind of relationship? You may not, maybe you have ongoing multiple partners and never get into a solid relationship.
I don't know, how many people in here know that Warren Buffett was in a poly relationship for many, many years?
Oh, I don't know.
Well,
But,
first
you
of
know,
all,
so
I
he
will
was
just
very
say
happy.
this, prior to 1960, as she said, that was not uncommon at all. That was not uncommon. She's talking about today where women want it started with women wanting the equality. Now men want the equality too, because they see women going off and being unto themselves and not necessarily so respectful of them and not necessarily feeling like they need the men to pay their way.
Yeah.
So it's changed. See, I
Right.
think and I think she's talking about today. She's not talking. She was very clear. Like, did I make that point?
Yeah, but I'd like to say that has not been my experience. And in Warren's case, in that particular case, it was actually her exerting her independence. She moved to San Francisco. She actually found him, his other mate, and she lived in San Francisco. He went there every weekend for many years, and they got a great relationship.
Listen, I don't disagree with anybody if they can make it work and be happy. That's
Yeah.
their business, as far
And
as I'm concerned.
doesn't it matter why you're choosing different partners? Are you doing it out of love because you have more love to give versus vindictiveness or being bored, or so you're choosing to cheat versus choosing to have another
Or
partner?
is it an intimacy barrier? Or is it an
There's a
intimacy
difference.
barrier?
Cheating
There
is
is.
an entirely different conversation.
That's
Well, what is she
than
that's-
having
talking,
well,
right, what is
swinging
she
and
talking
poly
about?
She's
talking
talking-
about poly and swinging relationships.
She's
That's a
talking about
terminology.
the fact that after the change in the paradigm in the 60s, there was much more of this experimentation with, and she has found that most of the people in the 70s, the original partners starting out with that idea of swinging ended up getting divorced, and that it caused much anxiety and much difficulty even with their children.
Yeah, I agree.
So it depends how it is. I mean, people can have a very open mind, I'm sure. I mean, think about Hillary and Bill. She put up with his having relationships with other women, I'm sure, and they still love each other in whatever way they love
Yeah,
each
but
other.
he cheated though. He cheated.
Well, he
She
did.
got
It
caught
wasn't a
cheating.
mutual.
Right,
I think
right,
it have to
right.
be mutual.
It has to be, it definitely has to be, it definitely has to
Yeah,
be
that's my
mutual.
point.
And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure how many people feel strong enough to have the person that they love be with someone else.
Well, is that because of taboos? Is that
It-
because
I
of
believe
the
it is. I
society
believe
that
it is.
says
I believe
you
it is.
need to be homogeneous, you
Well,
need to have one partner?
I mean,
that's-
I'm not in a relationship right now, but I personally feel that if I were in a relationship with somebody, I would want to be the only one. And she talks about that pair bonding. She says that we become attached as quickly as 3 to 6 times of having sex with the person. So if you do, how does that end up working out? I mean, if you love somebody, why would you want to think they were with somebody else? Would you? Would you care or would you not care? See, I mean, it depends upon who you are and how, I can't speak for everybody else, but I certainly see the things that would get in the way of making a relationship work. And if it's in the beginning of a relationship where there are multiple partners, I would be so offended to think that they would rather go off with somebody else at some time. Totally not respectful.
I'd like to add, jumping on what Maria said, everyone's experience is a reflection of their consciousness or the science of mind and our principles. That love, all love is God, and that is who we are. And from my reading and from my understanding of the principles of science of mind, that our connection with that oneness, our connection with Source, and really knowing that we are God in be expressed, that is love. And wherever we are in our consciousness, that's what's near to us. The more we are, each of us, connected to Source, connected to God, connected to the principle. Desire is a principle, as I read in my reading. It's a beautiful thing. Desire is a principle. It's a beautiful thing. Pleasure is. Love is. If the more connected we are with Source, the more wholeness we are and oneness, and we bring that into our lives. So we get to choose. We get to choose how connected we want to be with Source and how will that be expressed through and as us. So it's all about love and it's all about self-love. And self-love is loving the God within us, who we are, who each one of us is expressed as. So this whole conversation for me is beautiful, and importantly, this is about our own self-love and our consciousness, our connection to Spirit. Because everything that's in our universe is a mirror of what's going on in our consciousness and our hearts and our beliefs and the connection we have to Spirit.
Thank you. Thank you. Bob, do you have anything you would like to share?
This is actually one of my favorite topics in the whole world.
Okay. Then we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah. Yes, I just made some notes to myself. I mean, I actually did some reading about Carl Jung, and one of his thoughts is that within each person there's a male and a female, like persona. So he uses animus and anima.
Mm-hmm.
So a male also has a female anima, and a woman has an animus. And part of individuation is to come to terms with that and to begin to experience and enjoy all parts of oneself, and then to express it in whatever unique way that person decides to express it. So after reading that, I figured out, well, if that's true, and I think it is, then to pursue my feminine side. And I read a book called My Secret Garden. I've heard of that. That was a classic book many years ago. It talks about 9 widespread, female fantasies. And it was really enlightening and eye-opening, to read that and to think about it. And there's a difference necessarily between, but there can be a difference between, having a fantasy about something and just keeping it as a fantasy that I like to dwell on, but not act on. But there's also the idea of, well, I'm dwelling on it, maybe I'd like to actually experience it, and to move, and to sort of let that individual line of where taboo is for the person to be something that's taboo, and I'm not going to cross the line, or it's taboo, therefore I do want to cross the line. Like you tell the kid you can have all these things except that one. The kid says, well, that's the one that I want. And then there's something about that, about even spirituality, that this is off limits. It's the one, I don't know why it's off limits. At least that's been my path. It's the one who's over on the other side of the line and come back and tell about it. And then the other thing is that it seems in human nature there's a built-in sort of paradoxical desire. Like, I want what I can't have, and I can't have what I want. Like for example, many times a person will say that I want a partner who's stable, someone who's reliable. I don't want to give myself to somebody who's flaky and flighty and this and that. Stable, they're going to be there, they're going to be true to their word, etc., like that. And then after a period of time, like, oh my God, I'm so bored with this person because I know that they're going to be there, they're going to be stable, and wanting a little excitement, a little spontaneity. At the same time, a person can start with spontaneity. I want somebody who's wild, who's the bad boy, the bad girl kind of a thing. And then, oh my God, I'm fed up with that. I want someone who's stable. That it's somehow it seems to be almost like circular.
Well, is it circular once you have become whole to yourself? I mean, when you really have done the work that lets you know what really will make you feel good about your life in general, the things that heal you. I wonder if that's prior to the consciousness that's risen, because that's kind of unconscious thinking to me. Tell me what you all think. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think that if we really are working on developing our spirituality and allowing our consciousness to really dig deep, we really want something that's very solid. We don't want things that are nothing. We don't want things that are going to cause us anything in any way. Maybe exciting before you get to that place where you're working here. But I may be wrong. I mean, for me, that's so. I can only speak for myself. It's what I believe, and I think what Vicki was saying is very similar.
I think speaking of the words of Rev G, you know, are we showing God a good time? You know, that there is this creative, new and fresh element that is actually God. And as we become more okay with that, then we're willing to be a little more, at least for myself, you know, I'm willing to be a little more adventurous, or try new things.
But that's not anything to do, I'm talking about
Yeah.
I'm not seeking out outside relationships other than the relationship that the attachment.
Yeah. Yeah. And there can actually be creativity within a relationship too. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be.
oh, absolutely.
The only form isn't just with
Hopefully,
somebody else.
hopefully so,
Yeah.
hopefully so,
You're on a sleep.
that's right. Yes.
So I've been in seminars many times with Neil Walsh, and he shares what he calls his working definition of love. And because he said it could change, but this is what
Sure.
fits in for now. And he says, love always says, I want for you what you want for you, and anything else is counterfeit. And so I've been in those rooms, and there's conversation, you know, that ensues and stuff, and it usually takes about 10 or 15 minutes, and there's a hand go up, and for some reason I've noticed that in these rooms, it's always a lady in the back for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway, a hand goes up, and she goes, you know, what about and he also goes on to say, let me back up, he says, anytime requirement is in the space, if there's any requirement, you don't love that person. You are loving yourself through that person, but you don't love that person if you have a requirement on it. So the hand goes up and says, Neil, what about the requirement of monogamy? And he always says, everybody, take a deep breath, you're going to need it. And he says that you can have a monogamous relationship if both of you choose that. But if the person decides that they want to be with another, if I truly love them, I want that experience for them. And it has nothing to do with me. And so that's Neil's point of view on that. And he says, now, he personally chooses a monogamous relationship and he's had one for years. But he says, I'm also open to, you know, my partner or me sometime, you know, maybe in the future, maybe not. With one of his, he freely admits he's had disastrous relationships throughout his life. And one of his relationships, they took off their rings every day and they handed each other their rings and said, for today I choose you again. Because he says marriage is daily renewal. Every relationship is. And so anyway, I think that with Chris and I, we certainly had the freedom to do that, and it had nothing to do with whether I loved her or she loved me. It had nothing to do with that, because again, we use that as our working definition of our relationship too.
And there was no separation anxiety or peer bonding. So, because for me personally, I remember when I became involved after my first marriage with a man, that after a few times of having been intimate with him, I felt possessive of being in a relationship. It turned out to be the worst thing that could have happened. I shouldn't say it. It turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me because it caused me to grow a great deal.
Yeah, but those are instinctual things. That's what propagates the species. So that's an instinct in a human. But when we're talking about science of mind, we're talking a lot. We're moving from base emotions into higher thought, higher consciousness. So that's an entirely different thing. So I believe those 6 things, 6 times, those are base human things that are in our instincts. Because we still are animals too.
Yeah. Okay. So I am not making a judgment as to whether somebody chooses to have a non-monogamous relationship. If that's comfortable for them and they're willing to go that route, that's really fine. I just find it a little bit hard to really believe for myself, the way I feel, that it would be happy for either person to have the person they love being with somebody else.
Yeah, I don't think most people would do that, by the way. I just want to be very clear.
Okay. We are getting past the time. We need to stop. And I'm just going to conclude with this final statement. Conclusion and call to action. Embrace pleasure in all areas of your life. Notice if there are any areas that you have shied away from feeling pleasure or felt shame or guilt because of your pleasure. If you find that you have guilt or shame, see if those feelings are necessary or if you are only perpetuating ideas that you have been taught. Release the need to feel guilty for experiencing your pleasure. Seek out and engage in everyday activities that make you feel happiness, joy, and pleasure, knowing that by doing so, you are practicing mindfulness and co-creation with Spirit, God. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
So if you're comfortable, you may close your eyes and sit back in your chairs, relax, and take a deep breath. Taking in all we shared and all that we know to be true. The purpose of this treatment is for each one here to know their oneness with the divine. And know its many multiple expressions. There's one source, there's one light, there's one energy, there's one life. This life, this energy, this infinite mind is all there is. It is all powerful, it is all knowing, it is all good. It knows no space, it knows no time. It is love. It is God in all of its manifestation. It is that divine quantum field where there's infinite potentiality and infinite possibility. It creates out of love. The creation force is vibrant and alive. And it is in everything, seen and unseen. And I know that I am one with Source. I know that I am of divine. That each cell in my body is imbued with the Spirit, is imbued with electricity and magnetism and vitality, that I am divine in expression, known as Vicky. And I know that if this is true for me, it is true for each one here sitting in the sacred sanctuary today, each one on Facebook Live, watching, participating, that each one is a center of the universe that is expressed as themselves. That each one is God unfolding individually as themselves. That they are imbued and filled with all the energy, all the knowledge, all the love, all the vibrancy of the divine, because it can be no other way. That is God's gift to each of us, that we are of the divine. Knowing that this is so, I know, I claim for each one here union with their Source, union, complete wholeness and unity with the One, with the God that indwells within. That each one is connected in their consciousness, knowing that their consciousness is the consciousness of the divine. And going deeper into that, feeling and knowing and experiencing love. Love that goes beyond human understanding. The love of the self. Love that wakes us up in the morning on our own without us having to do anything. But love that keeps us going each day, breathing. We don't think about that. That is the divine working in and through and as us. And that our thoughts, each one's thoughts, is raised to the highest level, being in complete communion and consciousness with God. Knowing that they are being held and loved in the lap of the divine. And that their thoughts are God's thoughts. Their actions are God's actions. And this is expressed and that everything in their consciousness is a reflection of that beautiful union of divinity with the one, and that everything is divine. There's only love, and this love connects everyone, and that behind all circumstances that may not appear to be love, that each one sees with the heart of God, knowing that if there is fear expressing itself, the appearance of fear, that it is quickly and easily dissolved into the nothingness from where it came, because there can only be God, and God is love. And this is expressed through the principles that each person holds, the principles of the divine, which are our birthrights, right here and right now. Pleasure, sexuality, love, commitment, spontaneity, freedom, expression, enjoyment, fun, respectfulness, honoring. And these are all principles that are embodied within us, because everything that comes into our world is a mirror of our consciousness. So knowing that this is true, and I'm holding this and claiming this for each one here, I give gratitude that this is God in expression, that we are given and gifted with this beautiful gift of being divine in flesh. Oh, what a gift. What a gift and what a life that is eternal. And I give thanksgiving. And I release my word, my sacred word, into the action of the law of cause and effect, knowing that the words that are spoken are already complete, already done, already perfect, already final. And I end this treatment by saying, Amen, blessed be, and together we say, and so it is.
The affirmation, and then, yeah, we do that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So the affirmation today is, I embrace my pleasure today. In whatever form that may take. And the multiple forms that we have. Let's do it one more time. I embrace my pleasure today.
Yeah.
Thank you.